With the May elections rapidly approaching, the union of the United Kingdom is looking less and less secure. In Scotland, the pro-independence SNP are on course for their 5th consecutive election victory, and in Wales, pro-independence Plaid Cymru could be on the verge of forming their first ever government. Given that Sinn Féin, which seeks Irish reunification, has been the largest party in the Northern Ireland Assembly since 2022 and filled the role of First Minister since 2024, if the SNP and Plaid do win in May, then each of the UK's devolved nations will be led by a party that advocates for separation. But could this lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom? Is the United Kingdom heading for a breakup? Every corner of the UK could soon be led by parties that want to bring about its dissolution. While Northern Ireland doesn't have an election due until 2027, it's the only country in the UK with a way out of the union enshrined in law. The 1998 Good Friday Agreement states that the right of self-determination sits with the people of the island of Ireland alone, and the Northern Ireland Act of 1998 vests the power to call a border poll, also known as a referendum, in the UK Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, currently Labour's Hilary Benn, with it being stipulated that they must call a border poll if it appears likely that a majority of people in Northern Ireland would vote to leave the UK and form a united Ireland. That is effectively a political judgment. Exactly what would inform their decision is left deliberately unclear. A combination of high polling for Irish reunification and high polling or strong electoral victories for Irish nationalist parties would presumably factor in. With this in mind, Irish nationalists have cause for optimism for a number of reasons. Demographic shifts mean that Catholics now outnumber Protestants for the first time in Northern Irish history, as per the 2021 census, and the proportion of those identifying solely as Irish is rising, while sole British identification is falling. Additionally, from 2022 to 2024, Sinn Féin won a historic hat-trick for Irish nationalism, becoming Northern Ireland's largest party at Westminster, Stormont, the seat of the Northern Irish Assembly, and across local government. Since 2024, Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill has served as Northern Ireland's First Minister, a symbolic blow to British unionism, even though the role technically gives her no more authority than her deputy from the Democratic Unionist Party. However, Sinn Féin's electoral success is more to do with its consolidation of the nationalist vote. In fact, the combined nationalist vote share has hovered around 40% since 1998, and while support for Irish unity has grown modestly this century, it's still reliably behind in the polls. Meanwhile, the combined vote share of unionist parties, those that want to stay in the UK, has fallen from more than 50% to 40%. At the same time, the rise of the non-sectarian Alliance Party in the centre suggests that an increasing proportion of people are not wedded to either unionist or nationalist ideologies. Sinn Féin's call for a referendum by 2030, therefore, looks more like a fantasy than reality. However, that does not mask the fact that unionism is not the dominant force it once was in Northern Ireland, and cannot presume the status quo will hold forever. Unlike in Northern Ireland though, across the Irish Sea in Scotland, voters will head to the polls on the 7th of May. For a brief moment, this election looked like it could end the SNP's dominance in Scotland and provide Labour's Anna Sarwar the keys to Bute House. After all, the SNP had not only been engaged in intra-party infighting over the direction of the party, but it had also been embroiled in a party finance investigation, and Labour had emerged victorious in Scotland in the 2024 UK general election, winning 37 of the 57 seats north of the border, leaving the SNP with just 9. Around that time, Scottish Parliament polls also showed Labour within touching distance of the SNP. However, as approval of Keir Starmer's government and the UK Labour Party's polling rapidly sunk, Scottish Labour began to fall in the polls too. And, also thanks to the canny leadership of John Swinney, the SNP managed to stabilise its position. As things stand, it looks likely that the SNP will win their 5th consecutive victory at Holyrood, with the Times reporting in January that they would be only 6 seats short of an overall majority, potentially governing as a minority or forming a majority coalition with the pro-independence Greens. But if they are able to secure an overall majority themselves, this would be only the second time in their history that they've done so. The first time they secured such a victory, in 2011, they were able to convince then Prime Minister David Cameron to hold an independence referendum. With this in mind, SNP delegates agreed at their conference last year that, should they secure another overall majority this year, they'll claim it as a mandate for a second independence referendum, and lobby the British government to hold one. For context, the Supreme Court ruled in 2022 that a referendum can only happen with Westminster's approval. The UK Labour government has been clear that it would not accept this, with Chancellor Rachel Reeves stating, when there was a referendum just a few years ago, it was said that this was a once-in-a-generation referendum. People gave their verdict then, we don't need another one. Nonetheless, First Minister John Swinney claims that he has a secret plan with tactics ready to deploy in the face of Starmer's opposition. Exactly what this plan is not yet known. Down in Wales, plans for independence are not as developed as in Scotland. Welsh voters are also heading to the polls on May the 7th, and amid the polling collapse of long-dominant Labour, which we explored in a video last year, Plaid Cymru, the party of Wales, is battling reform for first place in the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, with neither likely to win a majority on their own. Given the positions of other parties, Plaid have an easier route to minority or coalition government than reform, and any Plaid-led government would be a historic first for Wales. However, unlike the SNP, Plaid are clear that they have no intention of seeking independence in the near term, with party leader Rhys ap Iorwerth explicitly ruling out a push for an independence referendum in his first term. Given that support for Welsh independence rarely exceeds 40% in the polls, ap Iorwerth seems to understand that there's more groundwork to be done. Ultimately, if, after May, each corner of the UK is led by pro-independence or separatist parties, it will not mean the imminent end of the Union, as each of the respective movements have some way to go to achieve their goals. However, this is probably not much consolation to Unionists. Rather, it would highlight a clear crisis of confidence in the Union, something that governments in Westminster should take seriously if they want to secure the Union's long-term future.